Nice to have you with us again, Curtis Devon. Thank you so much for returning to the Black Appalachian Coalition's podcast. I just wanted to check in with you because you are very popular on our podcast and see how you were doing with the environmental justice work that you had shared with us in the earlier podcast.
Well, thank you for having me again, and it's a pleasure, and I can't wait to get into some of the things that I've been up to since the last time we spoke.
Great. So tell us, what are some things that you think have helped build power in the community with the work that you're doing, or some stories that you might want to uplift?
Helped build power.
Or
I
how do you, yes.
I think the stories within themselves. Um, since we last spoke, I've been able to have two so far of what I've been calling Mon Valley meetings. So we try to designate a spot once a month to meet in the Mon. So far, we have Braddock and Hazelwood. Greater Valley and Braddock has decided to work with us, and Hazelwood Excursion and Hazelwood has decided to work with us. And the reason why I say I think stories build power is because what I'm noticing from being around these groups of people that is starting to grow is once they get around one another. So there's the narrative story, right? There's a story that I have that initially kicks off the conversation. But what I'm realizing is once that narrative is out there, or once that start has begun, you have all of this context and great filler that comes from the people that attend. And I think um, that actually is the fastest way to education. I try to break it down as best as I can. I'm somebody from the community, so I most certainly understand as well. But I think it hits different when you have your neighbor there or someone you went to high school with, and they're breaking it down for you, and they're explaining like this is what an environmental justice community is. This is what it means to be a sacrifice zone. Like, they can cite things that they have in common from the past. Like, you remember when, remember back in the day we used to walk to school and we used to smell that egg smell? That's what it is, and this is what it does. And I think when you have things like that, um, that translates to education, I think that ultimately leads to power.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, and always thankful that you're with us working in this space. What have you seen in Southwest PA with the environmental justice movement? Are you happy about what's transpired since the opening of the environmental justice office at the White House?
Uh, well, I'll take the White House part first. I honestly, so I'm familiar with, some of the good things that the Biden administration has done um, in conjunction with Kamala Harris. But honestly, I really can't see that far. And to quote one of my peers at the Philly side, Maurice Sampson, he says, um, these movements, they start locally, grassroots wise. And so I think, a perspective on it from inside out as opposed to outside in. Um, so like I have some suggestions that I think the White House and other elected officials could do, but taking that inside out approach, what I see in Southwest PA, am I happy? Well, first, am I happy with it? I am, and I think I can tie this into your first point. I am honored to work in the field with my peers, inclusive of yourself. Thank you for the compliment that you just given me. But I couldn't do it if it wasn't for you specifically and people like you. I learned um, from you all, and so I think as far as boots on the ground, again, I'm very pleased and honored to work with um, everyone. However, when it comes to, you know, entities that say that they have our best interests at mind, I am not happy. Um, I've reached out, and I won't say names, but I think I think the picture that I'm going to paint may vary from what one's mind eye may tend to lend towards. And what I mean is, when I say entities that are supposed to protect us, we normally think about government or big business. But I've reached out to several media entities and said, hey, look, you can clearly see where there's lead, there's high crime. And I don't just mean gun violence, I mean aggressive crime. So that's like burglary, robbery. Like I spelled it out easy as can be. And I'm still refining it. And the reason why is it doesn't pick up. Like, it's like tumbleweed, or you go to a reporter, let alone the entity. But you go and say, hey, do you guys know that everywhere in the city of Pittsburgh has either moderate to high levels of lead? I don't nobody like lead is literally a poison.
Right.
And so to bring it home a little bit, one of the things and to combine with my first point, like at the MON meetings that I mentioned, we were able to watch this documentary called Hiding in the Walls, and it looks at Baltimore, which is comparable to Pittsburgh. And the reason why this film or documentary is, I love it. The reason why I think it's so powerful is, again, Baltimore is comparable to Pittsburgh in size and culture, to an extent. The Steelers and Ravens, kind of trickles down to our sports. But getting back to the point, they're at a level right now where they're able to sue for high levels of lead. But as we know, lead does a lot of things. Like I just mentioned, it creates aggressiveness, but it also dissociates the body and mind. And what this documentary shows is it shows people who have been diagnosed with lead, the decisions that they made throughout their life, the decisions that they made once they got their payout. Um, and it's illuminating. Um, there's all walks of life in it, and um, one of the people in it goes on to say that lead is a root cause, which it is, and it ties to crime, like I mentioned. But to bring it back here into Pittsburgh, but in also context of lead, it affects maternal health. It affects uh, neighborhood value by way of how the kids perform in school, because a good school and a good neighborhood go hand in hand. When you find a good school, normally it's in a good neighborhood, and when you have a good neighborhood, you have a good school right there. So all of these things are connected. So those are the thoughts that come to mind. But like I said, I digress on that. But
No, I appreciate what you bring to this conversation, Davon, because uh, one is because there aren't very many African American males in this space. So I'm grateful to have you in this space so that we can showcase your work, hopefully uplift you and encourage you to continue, but never strain, right? That's one of the goals, is that we keep ourselves balanced so that we can continue on in doing this work. Um, I would like to hear some of your suggestions if you wouldn't mind sharing them. I think that our communities have difficulty sharing their stories still yet. And I'm trying to figure out a way to make and create an ease of that. And I feel like the EJ House didn't necessarily create um, a way to force or enforce the environmental justice designations. So, for instance, in Clairton, we are designated as an environmental justice community, but our community can't find that information on the Claritin webpage. So that's something difficult. If they don't know, go look at the EPA webpage. That's not what can happen. And I feel like those meetings that you're having, the Mon Valley meetings, will encourage people, and I'm thankful for those as well.
Yeah. So I do have a few suggestions that I wouldn't mind sharing. And I thank you for the acknowledgement. And so before I get into my suggestions, I would like to acknowledge some of my African American male peers, because as you said, that doesn't happen a lot. There's few of us, but my colleague Kiam Ansari that works with Clean Water, and he also works with the Sierra Club now. I think he's a genius. I truly believe that. It's an honor and pleasure to work with him. There's people like Carlos Thomas that I've run across in my time that is also brilliant. Mortel Covington also, who has held office for a little bit, but has done some of this work in this field. And I'm pretty sure there's others, but to your point, there's not a lot. So anytime I get a chance to acknowledge, the few far in between, I try to take the opportunity to. But with that being said, so I think you bring up a good point, and there's actually articles that document your point of what an EJC is, or what's an environmental justice community. In that in that article that I'm referencing, like, people from the community even question what that is, and that's one of the things that is pertinent to me. And what I try to do at the Mon Valley meetings is I don't try to assume or try to throw jargon at people that aren't necessarily familiar with what's going on. I think, going back to one of my previous answers, I think that's what's so impactful about having your peers there to help bridge the education gap, because you have people, other entities that are responsible for us, coming in using words like environmental justice and this and that and that. And yeah, some of what they're saying sounds good, but half of the people don't even know what you're talking about. What even qualifies us as an environmental justice community, is one of the questions that I got. And then once you explain, then they go, oh, you talking about that? I've been knew that. Like, but there needs to be some gap. And so I would suggest first is, and I don't want to say the name of the elected, but this is an example. There needs to be, sometimes there is a disconnect depending on how far away I think that you're from the area that you're representing. Even if you're from that area and you have good intentions for that area, I think sometimes the farther you are removed from that area, it's harder to keep the pulse on that area. And so what I mean by that is you have some electeds advocating for things that the community has come out numerous times in articles and said, like I'll give you an example. U.S. Steel. Right. And I know, Melanie, me and you talked about it, but and this kind of fits the bill of every politician. And I actually wrote this down as you were talking because I wanted to mention this, and I think this ties in perfectly. Everybody, and I mean everybody who wants to come to talk to any of those steel towns, they don't go and say, hey, y'all, here's the possibilities of it. It's always a built-in conversation. Like, when we get this steel, what are we going to do? And it's like, well, wait a minute. You can look it up. Anybody who's listening to this right now can look up. There's an article that says, this isn't Steel Town anymore. And it goes on to wax poetically, like, can we dream? I think Sharpsburg just got money to build out their riverfront and to do all these things. Mm-hmm. Like, geez Louise, can some of these other places of color predominantly areas, can we see something like that? Why is it always baked in that we have this? And then the quote that I wanted to mention that I wrote down is, in one of the articles, the person from the community just flat out says, we never have the right to say no. And that was powerful to me. Like,
Right.
we never have the right to say no. Like, Pittsburgh is not the still city. It's it's the city of bridges. We
Right.
should be a place that makes connections. I know I talked about a lot of my family lineage the last time. If it's the still city, it's the still city in essence of my grandma and my big mom. Happy birthday to my grandma. But still, as in the most high is working, be still, don't move, pay attention. So that's what I think when I think still city. But to bring it back home, it most certainly is not the still, like still as still was, no. People want to
Right.
see other things.
And what has your experience been? Have you spoken to many people about the Nippon Steel deal, and what have they to the community? Like, what have their thoughts been? Do you feel they've been thinking about it, or has it been something that they don't feel that they need to engage in conversation about?
A little bit of both, because to my last point, they never get to say no. So what does it matter? And that's where I try to come and intervene. Um, but again, it's it's folks coming in and perpetuating something that's all kind of always been a blight on
Right.
things, from my personal opinion. Because if we're talking specifically about people of color in the steel industry, we were the last of everything
Yes.
as far as the steel industry. So what to what benefit does it do any of us but
Right.
produce environmental hazards that impact us by way of like diabetes type 2, cancer, Claritin. So I can't think of anything. And even if you do, the needle in the haystack person that does have a high ranking position, is it really worth your health?
Right.
I don't, I don't
Exactly.
think so. So
Exactly. Yes. Those are some well needed conversations. And I'm really thankful, again, that you join us and that I have you as an ally. Standing in solidarity with you means that not only am I able to keep up this work, but I'm able to showcase and highlight others in this work. So I cannot commend you enough for being in this space. And I know that we have opportunities for high pay sometimes, but like you said, it may not be worth it. When we do what we feel is best for our future, then I feel that's the freedom that we have. And so I'm grateful that you let us be free and you show us how to be free. And you're doing this EJ work. Uh, what are some last thoughts or calls to action you might want to share with the Black Appalachian Coalition? What are some ways that we can help you or support the efforts that you have currently going on?
well, first and foremost, I would like to thank you all again for having me. And I think part of what goes into what you were saying is having a welcoming atmosphere. So I thank you all for also being welcoming, um, even going to the point of being one of the few males. That also is a thing. Really, to me, not a bad thing, because I was it was just me and my dad growing up. But outside my dad, it was a bunch of aunts and grandmas and big malls. So again, I'm just thankful to have a welcoming atmosphere, that I can speak and that I can be around you all's energy. That most certainly gives me energy, believe you me. But with that being said, some last thoughts and calls to action. One of the things that I kind of make it, uh, I don't want to use the word mandatory, but one of the things that I try to really stress is, if I'm going to do anything for anybody, I don't charge, I don't do any of that, but I will ask, can we do a follow up? Can we do something together? Because what I've noticed sometimes is there's a lot of one-offs. So, we'll do something, it'll have great impact or intention, but then there's no follow-up or follow-through with that. And I think people of color, our culture at times, if not often, deals with trauma and deals with all things of that nature. So I believe keeping things together and more tight, could be the best route of ways. So I think one of the ways to stay tight and together is, there's a public comment coming up on U.S. Steel, Edgar Thompson specifically, around toxics that come from U.S. Steel. I think, just so happens I have a list of the toxics that they that they give off. So, and at Clean Water, what we do is we put together an online blast, and we also put together a call to action. So once we do that, I'll share it out, with you, Melanie, and I hope that you can share it out to everybody that's watching this and everybody that's watching this. What it is it basically explains the situation, and it asks you to just hit the button to, give your voice and word, and then the last thing is we hope that you show up. But back to the toxins real quick. So U.S. Steel Edgar Thompson, which is located in Braddock, um, is a major source of things like particulate matter. So that's 2.5 and 10. Um, Nitric oxide, sulfur oxide, the egg smell, carbon monoxide, volatile organic compounds, and hazardous air pollutants. All the things that cause cancer, that get into your blood, that cause a whole bunch of diseases that unfortunately prematurely kill our loved ones. And so, actually, let me get you the date as well. Again, I'll follow up, but on September 23rd, 2024, the public comment period will be in person. So you can give your comment in person at Greater Valley, and that's in Braddock. And
Okay.
that's also one of the places that we do the Mon Valley meetings. And I hope to follow up with you all via email about the Mon Valley meetings as well, because it is not excluded to just the north part of the Mon.
Right.
We want to be able to go out to Clareton. We have Clareton in mind. We're talking to some folks to see if we can occupy areas in McKeesport and or Duquesne, to make it more, not only to reach out to them, but to also be a little bit more closer to Clareton. Um, we've been able to occupy these spaces in the Mon for free because of the organizations that we're working with. They believe in our message. So if there's anybody that has access to, a location that would make sense for a Mon Valley meeting, please reach out to me. We'll try to work it in, and that can be the third area that we go. But those are the things that come to the top of my head. There's other things, but I think let this be the beginning, and we can. I want to get in you all. So this is some things that I can do. I want to get in you all's list serve. I can share more with you all as they come down the pipeline, because these things are essential. Because what ends up happening is you're at Clean Water, and I think, as we talk about public comment, like one of my first interactions on the job was going to a public comment period hearing. And so I really didn't have any bearings of, is this the norm? Is this, abnormality? Like, how does this normally go? And what I realized is not a lot of people from our neighborhoods show up.
Yeah.
It's it's vital to participate. So that means if you just send in your comment, that's great, because they take those serious too. But what I've noticed is not a lot of people from the community show up, though, when they're actually discussing things about the community. I'll digress very hard on this, but I think this is so important. And I might have even mentioned it in the last one. But to my point, the last public comment period that they had about Edgar Thompson that I was involved in was around the consent decree. And essentially, there was $1.5 million to be allocated between the EPA and some other entities. Long story short, half of that money went towards like the Westmoreland Trail to connect it with the Braddock Trail or some other trail. My point, however, is folks in the community don't even use that trail. And so my point is they're voting and using money on vital, essential things that right now we're not showing up for. And that's what the Mon Valley meetings is supposed to be, is to educate ourselves, provide resources, and to create awareness that leads to further action.
Yes. I cannot speak any more to that. Thank you always for showing up for us. We encourage you. We align with you. We're a shoulder as well, and an ear for you. And we hope that our listeners remember that we are in this space. Please reach out. Please listen. Get connected to us and with us. Thank you all for this event.
Thank you for having me.